Really, this is it? We're debating age now? Donald Trump's voice cut through the press conference, instantly shifting the atmosphere in the room. What had been a routine event just moments ago had now turned into a tense confrontation. But what exactly had happened? Karoline Leavitt was confidently answering reporters' questions as the press conference neared its end. The room was filled with a sense of determination, but also politeness. Most of the questions had been about policy, economics, and current events. Everything seemed normal until one journalist took the microphone. The question was unexpected and provocative. "Ms. Leavitt," said a young reporter, smirking slightly, "running a country requires serious responsibility. Don't you think 27 is too young? How reasonable is it for someone as inexperienced as you to take on such a leadership role?" The room fell silent. A few reporters raised their eyebrows and exchanged glances. Some quickly scribbled notes. The journalist tapped his pen on the table, as if waiting to watch Karoline struggle. His smirk widened. Karoline hesitated for a brief moment, but quickly regained her composure. She locked eyes with the journalist. Her lips parted slightly, but she didn't respond right away. And then it happened. Trump spoke. "Really?" Trump said, tilting his head slightly. The reporter instantly straightened up. The room grew tense. Trump leaned his hand on the table and turned toward the reporter, his expression unreadable, yet there was a sharpness in his gaze. "So now we're debating age?" The journalist, still brimming with confidence, squared his shoulders. "Mr. President, gaining the public's trust requires experience. This is a matter of political maturity, and many Americans believe leadership should come with years of wisdom." Trump let out a dry chuckle, shaking his head slightly. "Experience? Oh, so now you're concerned about experience? That's interesting." He gestured toward the reporter with an open palm. Where was this concern when Washington was filled with so-called experienced politicians who spent decades accomplishing absolutely nothing? A few reporters shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Trump continued, his voice steady but biting. "I've been around long enough to recognize a weak argument when I see one. Let's not pretend this is about experience. It's not. It's about control." The journalist narrowed his eyes. "With all due respect, Mr. President, this isn't about control. It's about whether someone like Ms. Leavitt, who has barely had time to build a political career, can handle the weight of real leadership." Trump scoffed. He pointed toward the journalist. "See, that's the problem with your thinking. You assume time equals competence. But tell me, what have these seasoned politicians done with all their decades of experience? Have they fixed the economy? Have they secured our borders? Have they kept America first? No." The room was so silent you could hear the cameras clicking. Trump took a step forward, leaning slightly over the podium. "Karoline here. She's young, yes, and thank God for that. She's sharp, she's bold, and she's not weighed down by the corruption and backroom deals that define Washington's old guard." He glanced at Karoline, who sat composed but clearly taking in every word. "And that makes you nervous, doesn't it?" The journalist shifted in his seat. He was trying to maintain his composure, but Trump wasn't done. "If experience mattered so much, then explain to me why so many seasoned politicians have left this country in a worse position than when they started." A few murmurs rippled through the crowd. The journalist opened his mouth to argue, but Trump raised a hand to silence him. No, let me finish." His voice grew slightly louder, his tone razor sharp. "What you're really asking is, how dare she step outside the mold? How dare she challenge the system? And that, my friend, is why people like Karoline are exactly what this country needs." The reporter took a deep breath, attempting to push back. "But Mr. President, the public expects its leaders to—" Trump held up his hand. "Number, listen to me." The silence in the room was deafening. "Karoline is here because the people want change. And change? It makes people like you uncomfortable." Trump turned to Karoline and gave her a slight nod. "Youth means innovation. It means solutions." Then he turned back to the journalist. "Alexander the Great, he began his conquests at 20. Teddy Roosevelt, he was implementing reforms in his 20s. But when a young woman tries to contribute to this country, you suddenly have a problem. Why? Because you can't control her." The journalist let out a nervous chuckle. "But Mr. President, comparing modern politics to ancient history is a bit of a stretch, isn't it?" Trump shook his head slightly. "Not really. Then his voice sharpened. The so-called experienced politicians in Washington have led us into debt, into wars, and have eroded public trust. Trump leaned back against the podium. And if you're asking me whether I'd choose these career politicians over Karoline's energy, I'd pick Karoline 1,000 times over. At first there was silence, and then slowly a few reporters began nodding. Some exchanged knowing glances, a few even smirked. Then a wave of applause broke out. It wasn't just polite clapping. It was loud, unfiltered agreement. Some reporters hesitated but still found themselves nodding at Trump's words. Even a few individuals who had been skeptical of Leavitt's presence seemed to reconsider. The journalist still sitting across from Trump forced a thin smile, clearly trying to mask his unease. Karoline, who had remained quiet throughout Trump's speech, finally turned toward him, her voice calm but firm. "I appreciate the defense, Mr. President," she said, her lips curving into a small smile. "But I think I can handle my own response." Trump chuckled, giving her an approving nod. "Oh, I know you can. I just couldn't resist the opportunity to put him in his place." The journalist quickly tried to regain control of the situation. "Ms. Leavitt, what would you say to those who believe you haven't earned your position yet?" he asked, attempting to reclaim his footing. Karoline turned fully toward him, her eyes steady. "I'd say that real leadership isn't about tenure. It's about results. And if age is your biggest concern, then maybe you're looking at the wrong qualifications." The room went silent once more. Then a voice from the back called out, "Good answer," followed by another small ripple of applause. Trump, grinning slightly, picked up the microphone one last time. "You'd better get used to her, folks," he said, his voice carrying amusement, but also certainty, "because she's not going anywhere." As the applause continued, Karoline turned back to the journalist. "Experience isn't about years in office. It's about what you do when you get there. And I intend to prove that, whether you like it or not." The journalist, left with no real comeback, simply nodded, his confidence now noticeably shaken. Trump clapped his hands together, turning to the rest of the press. "Any other brilliant questions?" he quipped, earning another round of laughter. At that moment, it became crystal clear to everyone in that room. Karoline Leavitt wasn't just answering questions anymore. She was proving she belonged. What do you think about Karoline Leavitt's response? Share your thoughts in the comments. For more powerful stories, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. See you in the next video.